Is that what we're doing, Burial Cart?
That is what we're doing. But first, what we're doing here on this live stream is going to be an episode of Tapcaf Transmissions. Hello, everyone. I am Corey. This is Justin. Say hi to the nice people, Justin.
Hello, everybody. That's going to be a fun one for me to edit later when I'm doing the audio for this.
So do you want to restart that then?
Yeah, let's restart it cleanly.
All right. Everyone pretend you didn't see that part.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Gonna give it like 5 seconds.
Okay.
Hello there, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Tapcaf Transmissions. I am Corey. This is Justin. How are you doing, Justin?
I am doing very, very well on this fine Thursday evening in the disgustingly hot part of Canada that I live in. Is it bad for you too, Corey?
It's only 24 for me right now. What are you?
That's not too bad.
What are you looking at?
It's got to be in its 30s here. It's just very, very humid though. Like it's also been like nonstop. Like if you're on stream, I'm gonna show. I showed you this yesterday, but like look at this. Look at this farmer's tan I got. It's actually
died down since yesterday. He sent me and Charlie a picture of pure farmer's tan. It was
it's not great, and I'm at the point where like the heat is just exhausting. Like it's just every day, constant assault. And I'm getting kind of over it. I love summer, but I'm getting over it.
It hasn't been higher than like 31 for us, and I don't think it's been 31 for very long. So we've been having a pretty mild one so far. So I'm happy with that. I have air conditioning now though, so I don't care. When I lived in an apartment without air conditioning, that was.
It said it only got up to 25 today, so maybe I'm overstating things, but I don't know. It's been an onslaught. But yeah.
Do you have AC?
We've got a heat pump. Yeah, we do have a heat pump.
Okay.
So it's been pretty good. It's been pretty good. The worst summer of my life. I do think your worst summers are worse than mine, because the worst summer I ever had was in Toronto, and it was brutal.
Yeah, like living without air conditioning is the worst. Like my last apartment building that I lived in, I bought an air conditioner, like a window unit, and I didn't even have it like sticking all the way out the window because technically we weren't allowed to have it. But I guess they had someone that went outside and looked at all the windows to mark down who had an AC that wasn't that hadn't paid the AC fee. Because like it was $400 some odd to use it for the season, and because the idea is that you're covering the electricity for it, but that only covers 4 months. You can't use it for like past the start of September, and you can't pay like per month even, so you can't turn that 400 into 100. So
it sounds like I like pay the BBC coming for the television. Check your television license.
Like I pay for my own electricity now. There it was included, but I have never paid for a bigger house than my apartment was. $100 a month in electricity, let alone $100 a month just for the AC. So their whole thing was absolute bullshit. I was very upset about it.
The apartment that you were in was probably like the worst apartment of all time, to be fair.
Yeah, the cockroaches need to be cool too. Like,
but I mean that, and he's not joking. Like he would send us pictures of like, look where I found the roaches today. He's got like a killick swarm living in his fucking cereal box.
The best part was when the kitchen wall exploded from a pipe leak that had probably been going on for years, and hearing the maintenance people laugh as they pulled out hundreds of cockroaches. It was nasty. But anyways,
that's hilarious. That's so funny.
We'll talk about that again when we get to the Dark Knight trilogy. Today we are talking about New Jedi Order, Jedi Eclipse, Book 2. We covered Book 1, like it's got to be a month ago now.
A bit of a delay.
There was Kenobi. There was Brotherhood of the Sith. There was so much stuff to talk about in the meantime. But right now, is there any other Star Wars news we've got to talk about?
You mean Shadows of the Sith?
Shadows of the Sith. And Brotherhood.
Brotherhood. Well, it's kind of funny because this is Shadows of the Sith, and then that one was Shadows of the Sith, and this is Jedi Eclipse. So there's lots of things being eclipsed or shadows being cast.
Yeah, it could be a duology for all we know.
It could be. Except the fact that these are very, very different books. Straight up, which one did you enjoy more? Shadows of the Sith or this one?
This one probably.
Yeah, I think I'm there too. This book had there were aspects of this book which I thought were really phenomenal. Like the introduction is great, and then I felt like this was the New Jedi Order book the most so far, where it's felt like it's been really brought down by like needing to have all the main characters involved
Yeah.
and needing to have Han and Leia each doing their own thing. Did you kind of feel like that too,
Yeah,
or
like this book is definitely a lot of setup and not a I guess it's got a little bit of payoff for like the Han and Droma subplots, but it does feel like this duology uh was a bit weaker for having to do so much broad stuff. I think there were a few main plot points that were hit pretty well, even by all the subplots, because like a lot of it was
Mhm.
coming down to the feint attack between whether it's going to happen at Bothui or Corellia, and then ends up being on at Fondor, and that kind of ties everything together. But yeah, like there's there's less that happens to be paid off here than to be
Yeah.
paid off a bit later.
I just felt like the more interesting stuff was like at the very beginning where we see kind of the book starts off with Leia. She's a part of this kind of refugee corps within the New Republic, and they're on. Is it Jindine? Is that the world at the beginning? Um,
Yes.
yeah, so they're on a world, and it's perspective of the Vong is attacking, and it's pretty terrifying because we're seeing like what it looks like to be on the front line of a Yuuzhan Vong invasion, and I thought that was really great and very brutal. Not like in a gory way, like there's no gore or anything, but they do a good job of
Yeah.
capturing kind of how terrifying it would be. I thought that stuff was great, and that's kind of what I wanted more of this book to be a focus on, because there is kind of an undercurrent of dread.
Yeah.
It seems like between the last book, even the Yuuzhan Vong have made serious inroads.
Yeah, like Jindine is in the galactic south. You have to
Yeah,
bypass most of the rim and go halfway
yeah,
to Bothui before you get there.
right, exactly. So it's like the opposite of where they invaded, and like I thought that stuff was really great. And then whenever it was like the Han stuff,
Didn't
it,
care.
it I couldn't yeah I didn't care, and which is unfortunate because the lens of like actually following these refugees, which the Rin are, is actually a really interesting idea. But when you make it, oh, these are, of course, it's a galaxy of trillions upon trillions of people, and it's like Han is meeting everyone and they're all coming together, it's just like it's just not interesting compared to, it's the very different story they could be telling.
Yeah, like I think part of it is that the Han and Droma looking for the other Rin storyline is the only thing that really makes this a duology, while still
Mhm.
being like the Han and Droma stuff specifically one of the possibly less interesting plots going on. Because you do
Mhm.
have two tracks you're following uh with the Rin alone, where there's the group they're trying to find, and then there's Han and Droma together, and then refugees more broadly. You also have Leia's stuff, but
Yeah.
she kind of ties into the invasion a little bit more because she's going to talk to the Hapens and enlist the
Mhm.
Hapens' health. So like, yeah, like I think the refugee through line is one of the more interesting parts of NJO as a whole.
Mhm.
And I think there's a lot of it that actually James Luceno goes farther with uh, than what the other authors do, where like he really hits it with the not just the refugees but also the exploitation by Salish Egg, which
Mhm.
is like an agricultural company that's
Yeah,
taking
that
in
part
the
was interesting.
refugees, but it's essentially turning them into
It's basically
indentured
a
servants and
Yuuzhan Vong,
slave.
and not only that, there's like even more levels of darkness to it, where like the people who are purporting to say this to help people get off are really just putting them in line of the Yuuzhan Vong advance. Um,
Yeah,
like which is how everyone kind of ends up at Fondor at the end.
yeah,
And I believe that's one way later on that they can kind of predict the Vong's movements, is because one of the big kind of things in this story is the fact that the Vong aren't operating on like a strictly strategic basis. A lot of what they're doing is motivated by causing fear,
yeah.
and that's kind of shown through kind of how the refugees are treated. Like the Vong will follow refugees across the galaxy simply to keep people in fear.
Yeah, so I guess we should probably do a quick synopsis of what's going on. So there are a
Mhm.
few main plots. There's on Leia's side, you start with her work in Cellcore, which is the
Mm.
Senate uh, Senate Select Committee for Refugees. So she's basically taken charge of the refugee movement, trying to advocate for them in the Senate and trying to find worlds to be able to settle refugees on. A lot of planets are not really able to take them or not willing to take them.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes from there into trying to convince the Hapens to join the fight and help the New Republic. They've got the Imperials on board from her prior work, but still waiting on the Hapens. This next plot line, or the broader plot line within the New Republic and some of the other character stories that we see, is trying to figure out exactly where the Vong are going to strike first, or strike next. Because from Jindine, which they take at the start of the book, they can either go to Bothawi, or which is farther out in the Outer Rim, or they could go to Corellia, which is seen as like the entry point to the core. And so the New Republic is trying to figure out, do we send our ships to Corellia, or do we send them to Bothawi? And they end up planning to defend Bothawi so they can lure the Vong into attacking Corellia, where they want to use Centerpoint Station to blow everyone up. But it turns out the Vong want to attack Fondor instead. We also
that was
have
one part that I enjoyed. Sorry, go ahead.
The last one is just we got a lot about the alliance between the Hutts and the Yuuzhan Vong. Not alliance, but the Hutts are willing to work with the Vong and give them some territory.
The Hutts are acting very Hutt-like, to be honest.
They want to take the information the Vong is giving them and give it to the Republic.
Yeah. I actually really enjoyed the kind of figuring out how to put your fleets every like which corridor into the core you want to protect.
Yeah.
Because like this is a major kind of stepping point in the war, and like you can run the risk of making the universe seem too small, but they kind of justify why they need to make these decisions, because it's like this is just one avenue of attack. You've also got to protect Bilbringi, which is kind of the other way into the core or towards Coruscant. You got to protect, Coruscant itself and that avenue. So that was interesting. And I liked, probably my favorite part of the book is the kind of the secret New Republic like intelligence security council knows that they want to employ Centerpoint Station, but ultimately they've got to go through like the political structure. And it's kind of funny, they kind of trick the council and they use like Bothan, like kind of how everyone feels about Bothawi versus Corellia, to basically make the politicians do what they want, where their goal is to move the fleet towards Bothawi and leave Corellia undefended. So they make certain politicians act like they really want to protect Corellia. So the other politicians are like, no, we gotta protect the Bothans. So they kind of play right into their hand in a way.
Yeah, and ultimately what they're doing there sets the stage for a lot of the divisions that are going to be happening within, or exemplifies at least a lot of the divisions that are going to exist between the New Republic members and make their jobs a lot harder. Like Bothawi and Corellia, ironically, do end up in the same alliance later on to fuck over Coruscant. Yep. But all the playing the ends against the middle there is part of what leads to the Hapen fleet blowing up at Fondor as well, because none of the people are properly coordinating. They're all just trying to take advantage of each other. But one of the things that I do really like about this book is, we get a lot of battles, or a couple battles, we almost never really focus on the battle itself. There's plenty of other books in the NJO that are like really good battle scenes, but here the battles are almost peripheral to how they're handling the refugees, or because like with Han's stuff, he's collecting the refugees during the battle at Fondor, so we don't really get much of the larger battle. We just get what Han is doing during it. And even at Jindine, we're getting a few details about the battle, but it's mostly just the Rin and then Worth Skidder standing in line hoping to get on a transport out. So it's creating a lot of sense of urgency and kind of showing the stakes of the battles a lot more than the battles themselves. So I thought that was really well done.
Yeah, and then of course the book ends with the big philosophical question. It's kind of another fight for Jason and Anakin to have, where kind of as you alluded to, the big final confrontation is at Fondor, where the Vong have tricked the New Republic, and ultimately these very important shipyards are not as protected as they should be. However, Corellia, the Corellian system, has been readying Centerpoint Station, which we talked about probably nearly half a year by now, or at least a few months ago in the Corellian trilogy. It's this massive super weapon which can shoot these big, I think they call it like gravitonic beams or something across the galaxy and do a bunch of other things. And the big kind of conversation is, how do we use Centerpoint Station? Because it can be used in this offensive style, or it can simply be used as a big, really big interdictor.
Yeah.
So to trap the Yuuzhan Vong in the system so the New Republic can come in and jump on them. They call this kind of treating it like a shield to protect the Corellian system, which I don't know. I don't think that makes much sense, because if there's no fleet there, Corellia's going to get fucked, but whatever. Or using it as a sword. And at the end, Anakin has just sort of reactivated Centerpoint Station. It's been kind of imprinted to him from the Corellian trilogy. And he's got a chance to take the shot at the Yuuzhan Vong fleet, which he can feel through the Force. Ultimately, he doesn't take the shot, mostly because of Jason's encouragement. And it ends up that Thrakencell Solo, who we also met during that trilogy, does. And as you alluded to, he destroys not only a big portion of the Yuuzhan Vong fleet, but an even bigger portion of the Hapen fleet, which my phone will always autocorrect to Japan.
Yeah,
but
the poor Japanese fleet was ruined at Fondor.
Yeah, so it destroys an even larger portion of the big Hapen fleet, which has just sort of been convinced to join the war. So,
yeah, and the Hapens voted to get involved. It was like 31-30, which I think that's the kind of vote you need a clear majority on normally. They might want to revisit their constitutional setup for that. But yeah, like Isolder's all raring to go. He just wants to find a fight, and then they all get blown up. Because Centerpoint can only Anakin can set it back up, but apparently Thraken can fire it as well. So I think Anakin's moral dilemma of like, okay, I'll get it set up and then I'll see how they want to use it later. Like, congrats on making the decision not to fire it at a point when literally anyone else could as well.
Yeah, so, I don't know. This is where I really start to disagree with Jason. I think Anakin's kind of I guess it's an allegory or whatever. His comparison of this is like if someone in an alleyway is pointing a blaster at your friend, what do you do? And he chooses not to kind of respond with his lightsaber, his metaphorical lightsaber at Centerpoint Station, and yeah, I just don't know if I agree with that, especially where he probably could have, he probably wouldn't have killed the Hapens. Now you're taking a lot of lives, but you're doing it to save pretty much an entire star system. So
I agree with Jason up until it's already turned on and ready to fire, at which point, just if Anakin knows he can take the fucking shot, just take the fucking shot, then trash the place. Because if it's on and Thraken can fire it anyway, you've just wasted everybody's time and you've set up the exact situation that's going to be a problem for you later. Like, I agree with the argument that Jason and Luke kind of agreed with that, or were kind of making at the start, where it's just don't go there, don't touch it. Let's not set that problem up. But once you're there, once you got it set up, this is the one time it's going to be used for something that is a positive. Like, you can take out that Vong fleet, but after that, you've just turned it on for no goddamn reason.
Yeah, no, you're right. I guess you could make the argument that like even I think even in a vacuum, like Jason is just so totally against it because he just doesn't think that the Jedi should ever be doing anything but kind of deflecting blaster bolts. And Anakin is younger, he's more impressionable. I think Anakin in a vacuum would have chosen to fire 10 times out of 10, but he kind of capitulates to Jason ultimately.
Yeah, like Jason isn't just thinking about, Centerpoint being active could be a huge problem for generations to come. He's thinking, this is bad for us to do anything at all.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and I mean, and that's the whole kind of ethical dilemma the Jedi are facing. Like this is just one sort of micro version of that, where some of them, like Luke, want to just respond where they are, which I don't know. Like I don't know if that makes any more sense, really. Like in this case, if the Jedi were there, like if Jason was there, he would have fought. Like if he were in an X-wing, or if he were on the surface of Fondor and the Vong were invading for some reason, like he would have fought. I think it's pretty clear. So for me, like when you have a tool to not defend people, like where the Vong are actively invading a system, I think it's kind of an artificial distinction. Personally, I think that's kind of what Anakin's maybe getting at as well.
Yeah. Like Anakin, I don't want to do like both sides of any issue are wrong. You need to find somewhere in the middle. But like Anakin and Jason are clearly set up to be kind of going too far in their own positions. Where like, Jason never wants to see anyone fight anything. Jason thinks the Jedi should just be monks off for their own intellectual pursuits. And even Luke goes too far in that direction. Whereas Anakin does think the Jedi ought to be these like warriors determining who does everything for everyone. It's kind of the same thing we were talking about with the scene earlier on. Was that in Vector Prime or was that in Dark Tide, where him and Mara are on Dantooine, and Mara uses like the worst example ever for why Anakin should just tell everyone what to do.
With the volcano or whatever. That was one of the later ones.
Like Anakin is definitely more correct than both Jason and Kip Durin, who like Kip very much just wants to tell everyone what to do and go around killing and arresting whoever's convenient for him, like not answerable to any other kind of power in the galaxy, which is kind of the bigger problem, that they're left to their own devices and they get to decide that they're the philosopher kings that determine what's good for everyone else, because they get to access superpowers, which not good. But
not great. There'd be a fun version of the boys in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah. I was about to say, like, Kip's Homelander.
Yeah. Kip's Homelander. I can't. I don't really want to make the rest of the comparisons, but
is Anakin Starlight then?
That's what I was gonna say, but I was like, is Luke Starlight? I don't know. I think Anakin is Huey, maybe.
No, Anakin's useful.
Yeah, but okay. Well, yeah, fair enough.
I guess Kip has to be Butcher.
Yeah, Kip's got to be Butcher. And
is Jaina Huey?
Yeah, maybe.
Jaina is way more useful than most people, like including 99% of the Jedi, but just all the time she spends with Kip.
Okay, I want to talk about something slightly different. So there's unsurprisingly, a Star Wars EU subreddit, and also probably unsurprisingly, it can get a little cringy sometimes, especially towards like the blatant sequel hate or whatever else. And it's good frequently though as well. But there was a post today that it just reminded me of how many people like Star Wars Legends but don't actually read it. And this is the story. This is the post I saw today. The idea was, what if Legends characters met their canon counterparts? So basically, what if canon Luke met Legends Luke? How would each character react? And the number one and most repeated one was EU Han would do unspeakable things to canon Han. Someone said, like what? Like violence. And then someone said, EU Han was a family man that was actually there for Leia and his kids, having grown as a character instead of going back to his old ways. And like,
did you never read any fucking Legends?
I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? This is like not the only time he does this. He's done this in multiple storylines. Like Han literally, there's like 3 different times where he just fucks off because he can't.
He wants to disown Jason in the Corellian trilogy because he's slightly overweight.
Yeah, like, you haven't read the books. Like, if that's genuinely what you think, you haven't read the books in the past decade, or you have got very selective memory. I was trying to think of other storylines, but there's so many where they all kind of just flow together.
There's the passage in here, like when they're talking about Salish Ag, where they basically say like all the diseases could be eradicated, all the food could be given out to people, just from what the labor droids allow to rot in the food or rot in or on the ground. And if that was in a modern Star Wars book, that would be they're putting their SJW politics.
Oh yeah. I thought you were gonna talk about the end where Leia literally laments the fact that like Han could be around if he chose to be.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I was trying to think of some other examples where Han just fucks off, because like there are a bunch where he literally finds excuses to just leave. Is the Black Fleet Crisis one?
No, I don't think he wants to leave on that. But that's when Leia's like locking herself in her room as well. Like that's Leia doing it.
Yeah.
And he gets kind of co-opted back into the fleet.
Yeah. But yeah, I was just shocked that that was literally the number one upvoted post, and I responded by saying EU Han abandoned Leia every chance he got, LOL, yeah. And I got -6 votes. So like I don't know.
I think
Leia almost dies in this one.
By Dark Nest and by like Millennium Falcon, then they're better.
Yes, yeah, he definitely settles. He for the like legacy and Fate of the Jedi stuff, he definitely kind of settles in a bit more from what I remember, but
yeah. So what we're saying is that Chewbacca was a bad influence. It was all Chewie's fault, really.
Yeah. Basically. Don't die, loser.
I mean, did they comment on Legends versus Canon Chewie there? Like, is it just living canon Chewie making fun of Legends Chewie?
I admittedly didn't see that one there. But
neither of them is a good parent in either continuity, is basically what it comes down to.
No, exactly.
Like, Han and Leia separating in new canon is probably healthier than any part of their relationship in Legends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I agree. And I still don't get that's the one complaint I don't like about the new canon characters, like the fact that, you know, things get tough and they don't behave perfectly. Like, yeah, Han and Leia broke up when their kid essentially died. Like he didn't die, but he pretty much died. Like, do you know how common it is for people to break up in the real world if your kid dies?
Yeah.
Like, I just can't anymore. Like I just can't with these people. And these are my people too. Like, I like these people. I like Star Wars Legends. I don't want to be ripping on the people that like it, but like, fuck.
Yeah, I got a bunch of people who got like very angry at me at one point because I say I'm a Legends fan but wasn't making fun of canon.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so
I mean, I do that a lot as well.
No, like, I wasn't like planting my flag exclusively as like Legends is great, canon is shit.
Yeah.
That's why we got the first review we ever did for the podcast of these fence sitters calling Luke an incel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which what did Han do when the kids were abducted by was it Hethrier? Yeah, I think it was Hethrier that time. Because I forget what Han was doing in that book.
I don't really remember, to be honest.
All the mediocre books of that era kind of like blur together for me.
Yeah.
Like Crystal Star and basically everything between like Dark Empire and the Corellian trilogy, not other than the Black Fleet Crisis, because that's later, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So all those books kind of turn into one for me. So I can't remember if Han would have been on Crusade Station with Luke or if he was off doing something else. He was. Is that the same thing?
You remember he's like, is it that one where he's like kind of a little bit broken up from Leia, where he's like acting kind of weird in Crusade Station?
Yeah. Yeah. It happens a lot.
Yeah.
Well, someday we'll get to Millennium Falcon and everything will be happy for them other than their their two dead kids and having to take care of their granddaughter.
I mean, they enjoy their time with their granddaughter as well. That's like one of my things that I remember from Fate of the Jedi is just they're all just sitting around all the time, going to the zoo or watching the news.
Yeah, like it's also a really common thing where bad parents can still turn into good grandparents because usually there's less responsibility there and they just get to do the fun stuff. But I guess with Alana, they took full custody pretty much.
Yeah, my grandparents had license plate that said if I knew being a grandmother was so much fun, I would have done that first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't play sports, so how much attention I got from my grandparents depended very much on which side of the family we're talking about.
Wait, wait, say that again?
I didn't play sports, so one set of my grandparents at least
yeah.
Me and my sister weren't worth paying as much attention to because we wouldn't be famous sports people.
Yeah, you weren't making it to the show.
Yeah. And then when I started doing a political science degree, they thought that meant I was going to become a politician, and then suddenly it was more interesting to try and get on my good side, I guess. Still like them, just never really got to know them very well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of my grandparents, I don't dislike them. It's just I could just tell they just don't really care about us that much.
Yeah,
which is whatever.
Yeah, like I have 3 pairs of grandparents because my mom's parents got divorced and remarried before I was born. So
kind of sick, honestly.
Well, we kind of got lucky there because we got a full mulligan on one of the pairs that just never really dealt with them.
Get a free redo.
Yeah.
Yeah,
my mom's dad and my mom's stepmom I haven't talked to since she died. Like the first thing I did when my mom died was walk out of her hospital room, and I think I gave my grandpa the finger. So I don't think he noticed, but I didn't know they were there until that point. And so I went and did the rounds and then came back. It's like, oh yeah, she's gone. I'm sorry. So either they saw that and they just let it slide, or they didn't, and I should do it again someday if I ever see them again.
This is honestly the precious memories portion of the Tapcaf Transmissions podcast. Remember that time my mom died and the first thing I did immediately was tell my grandparents to fuck off?
Hey, it could have been worse. We told my uncle the wrong time to show up because it would have been weirder if he was there.
Fair enough. I don't know how to segue out of that. How do you usually segue out of discussions about your dead mom, Corey?
Well, I don't think any parents will die. Probably a lot of parents died in the Yuuzhan Vong War, but Han and Leia don't die as parents. But they do lose 2 of their sons, Anakin and Jason, who spent a lot of time arguing in this book. And we've kind of gone over the start of that. But we are starting to kind of get into the next few books are going to be very Anakin heavy until he dies in like 3 books.
Yeah.
So
I can't believe we're getting that close.
They do have a bit of a rapprochement between Anakin and Jason. Because even in this, like, they're not arguing as much as they were in Vector Prime, where they were like really at each other's throats, whereas now they're still disagreeing and they still get kind of heated. But like Anakin still ends up looking to Jason for advice, and they're not like threatening to kill each other as immediately, which is it's nice.
Yeah. I still don't really know how I feel about Anakin as a character. Like, was it a mistake to kill him off this early on, as we're getting to in a few books, or was it kind of necessary to take the kind of drama to the next level?
Yeah, I think you were getting to the point where like someone important had to die in and around Star by Star. Like, I don't know if I think the right move really was to kill Anakin instead of Jason, because like Anakin was getting too close to being a super perfect Jedi for the future.
Yeah,
and I think part of that was because that's what he was being set up intentionally to be until they ended up having to switch later in the game who was going to die. And I just don't know how interesting Anakin's stories would have been after that. Like,
plus you lose the twin dynamic.
Yeah.
If you still want to kill one of the Solo kids anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think there was any world in which they should have killed Jaina. I think Jaina's the right choice to definitely keep alive. But like, I think Jason has enough interesting, unresolved elements of his what is the role of the Jedi, what is my role as a Jedi, and like all of his philosophical stuff that is like still worth exploring. Whereas Anakin is a lot more straightforward in how he's handled.
Hmm.
Like he's too boring of a character.
Yeah, no, I agree. And honestly, that is just part, like, it's part of just the fact that he saw a lot less action than the other kids.
Yeah,
Like especially in the novels, like the main novels. Obviously, he got his own young reader series, but I mean, we get Jason and Jaina from the Thrawn trilogy, and then they're,
yeah,
Anakin sometimes around, but even in like the Jedi Academy trilogy, he's kind of just like just a young, even younger kid. So the focus is always kind of on the older ones.
yeah.
So you're right. He does end up being, besides for the Corellian trilogy, he does end up being the less interesting one.
The Anakin kill off Anakin plan was actually something that Tim Zahn slid into the NJO author's notes that none of them really caught on to.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, get rid of that one character he didn't make, couldn't ignore.
Yeah,
But
yeah. He was writing under pseudonyms, and he's just like every time a non-Zahn character died, it was just Timothy Zahn under some pseudonym. Christy Golden? Yeah, right.
For some reason, Callista came back and was beaten over the head with a chair. So I think there's one other character you could kill off in that spot that they never would have killed off, but could have really set up for the future of interesting plots for all the solo kids and going forward. Now, never gonna happen, but what if Luke dies in Star by Star instead of Anakin?
That's an interesting. That I was actually going to bring that up too. There's actually a point in, I think, Fate of the Jedi where they do a Luke fake out death for like an entire 3 chapters where I think Jaina thinks she shoots him down or something.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe I guess it's probably Legacy of the Force. Yeah, I was thinking that, like, could they have the balls to kill off Luke? And if they were going to, I do feel like New Jedi Order might have been the prime point, just because like this story showed that Luke, like, for one, Luke is not very present in this story, and I don't think the story is any worse for it.
Yeah, like I don't see them ever doing that in these books. Like they never would have been allowed to kill Luke, Han, and Leia. Like George would have vetoed that immediately. But I think that killing Luke makes the most sense here.
Yeah, and part of the problem is I don't find Luke to be as interesting as some of the other characters until, like, the only real story for me where I'm like, okay, I'm really, really happy Luke is in this time period is, I guess, some of the later stuff in the NJO, and then I really like when he and Ben have their journeys in Fate of the Jedi.
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah, I feel like, and it would have been shocking because he's the most powerful Jedi in the galaxy, and that really would have driven home the, oh shit, nobody's safe.
Yeah.
If they're gonna kill Luke, like, but he's like the most. Luke Skywalker is literally one of the most famous characters in fiction.
Yeah.
So
Luke just ends up in such a position where whenever he takes a position on something, it almost always has to be the right one. Whereas if he's dead, then that sets up stories for Ben. I don't think Mara ends up dying later on. I think that that has a really clear plot line for Anakin where he's not just Golden Boy who's eventually going to take over for Luke. He has to find what his role is in the Order. You have what happens with Kip's faction now that Luke isn't there to kind of glue everyone together through like grudging respect. Because like Kip and Corrin, without Luke there, we're never going to get along for the first few books of this, and he was starting to pull them back into the fold. So like what happens there if that glue is gone? Do they go off and make their own Jedi schism, or do they work it out?
That could have been interesting.
Yeah.
Split the Jedi up and then deal with it later. Like,
Yeah.
split the Jedi up. They work together during the war in their own way, obviously, and then maybe that's kind of, the one of the next kind of conflicts afterwards.
Yeah, but I guess we're kind of getting super far away from Jedi Eclipse here.
Yeah, I mean, look at my notes here. This obviously there were lots of kind of little references to this book. Were there any particularly fun references that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, like it was fun having the characters from Corellian trilogy back with
Mm-hmm.
the Governor General being, or the Governor General and Ibrahim being
Yep. Yeah, I
characters that
was
were pretty
really
big in
happy to see
there.
Ibrahim again. He was one of
Yeah,
my favorites. And he was also what I remembered. He was also one of the ones who didn't want Jason or Anakin to fire. So I was like,
yeah,
okay, if Ibrahim says it, maybe he's right.
yeah. We also
But
got Bollocks, like probably Bollocks coming back, who doesn't think he's Bollocks, leading the droid revolution on
mhm,
Salashag, because I guess we kind of slept on that as well,
mhm.
where Han frees these
That was the
droids.
worst part of the book, in my opinion. So unnecessary.
Well, if someone else had done literally anything with it, it wouldn't have been unnecessary. And this is still
Mhm,
a point in the NJO where something could have been done with it. Because we
mhm.
were talking about that in Vector Prime, and I think there's a little bit of it in Dark Tide. But like Vector Prime starts off with a droid sacrifice on Asarian and Romamul, or
Yep.
Romamul specifically, and like we have a lot in the books about like, oh, 3PO having his identity crisis.
Mhm.
So we're only what, 4, 5, maybe 6 books in here. I think 5. I think it's
Yeah.
only one standalone, the two duologies. For some reason, I always think there's a book between Dark Tide and Agents of Chaos.
I should clarify. I actually think the idea of okay, they're clearing out all of their droids not to hire people, but because they want to capitulate to the Yuuzhan Vong when they come and have this big sacrifice ready. I think that's an interesting idea. What I don't like is the Han Solo style adventure
Yeah,
part where he's literally breaking into the facility. They're doing the Indiana Jones river rafting, complete with waterfall
yeah.
sequence and everything else.
That
That
is
was the
part of
part
the
I didn't
weakness
like.
of the book, where it is pretty short, and then
Yeah,
he
it's super short.
Luceno, who always does these kind of references, is trying to put in not just references to the original source material, like Bollocks, but trying to almost recreate those stories in the subplots,
Mhm.
which can feel a little bit rushed uh, and a little bit forced. Which, like, I didn't hate it, but it was definitely
Yeah,
I s-
I wouldn't say I hated it either. It kind of kept the book. It kept the book. It definitely kept the book a little down where it could have been better. There were some obviously. I mean, this was a James Luceno book, so there were some pretty deep cuts here. We get a couple of references to the Star Wars audiobook or the Star Wars radio drama. When talking, there's one section where Leia is trying to find a planet for these refugees, and there's kind of some allusions to how she helped the planet out in the past from an Imperial, and how she was paid back. And it turns out there's actually some allusion to how the rebels got the Death Star plans, and that kind of ties into that. And I'm trying to think what else there were. There were some good ones in there. Um, what was the one that I was thinking? Oh yeah, we saw Bombassa again,
yeah,
who we saw most recently in the Thrawn duology. He's like that gangster, kind of in the Cathol sector. So
yeah,
I was really happy to see him. Did you realize he'd been canonized in Solo the
yeah.
movie?
He was on Corellia, wasn't he? Or what
Yeah,
in the yeah.
I think he's on like I didn't realize, but from what I briefly read, I think he's on like the Imperial recruitment place in Corellia. But that was kind of blew
Yeah.
my mind.
I do think it's kind of weird how Bombasa is like so high up in the Hut hierarchy. We're like, yeah,
Hmm.
they've got their galactic businesses going on, but it
Yeah, that's
seemed
not really
almost
how
like
I
Krev
imagined
was,
him.
yeah, because he was in the meeting with like Borga and Gardula and stuff, wasn't he? So
Yeah, but in the duology, isn't he he's kind of as more like an independent guy, isn't he? He seems to be a
that's what
bit.
we're supposed to think,
Yeah,
but
yeah. Um, what was I gonna say? I one problem I had with this book too is I felt like there were maybe too many. It's for me, it's kind of hard to keep track of all the Yuuzhan Vong just because their names are such nonsense. I was starting to get that a little bit in this book, where like I can remember Noma Nor and obviously like the really high ranking ones, but every book introduces two Yuuzhan Vong like commanders, you just know they're gonna die, so they all kind of just blur together for me. Especially that was a bit of a problem when combined with like all the huts, where it's just slug names over and over again.
I don't know. I didn't really find that. Like, we do get Chine Cal added as a one-off character, but he's also isolated from the other.
Yeah, he's on that ship.
Yeah, the other Yuuzhan Vong enough. Like, other than that, we only really had Nominor, Malik Kar, who's been brought up a fair amount, and then Nash Choka and Savong Law. Where I almost found like there was a bit too much top heaviness and like only relying on important Vong people, where it felt like it was a group of like 5 buddies just invading the galaxy together. So
yeah, and Savon Law only appears on hologram, right?
Yeah, he hasn't really made it into the galaxy yet.
Yeah. It was one thing that was kind of weird is I think Nominor is still my favorite. Kind of weird how they talk about him collaborating with the Praetoriate Vong.
Yeah.
Almost like the Praetoriate Vong were like there's the idea that they're sort of separate and kind of clearing the way for the proper invasion, but in this it almost talks about how they're like it almost makes them out to be like a rogue element almost.
Yeah. Like the way Vector Prime was set up, it was almost like it was kind of done so that if the book didn't do super well, they could just stop. Yeah. And the way it ended up playing out in the story, it just they had to kind of separate them a bit more as they went on. Like the farther you get into the series, the more the Praetorate Vong just get kind of shit on and talked about like they were a separate sect that stepped out of bounds rather than the sacrificial vanguard of Vong forces.
Yeah.
So
which I guess I guess you can kind of rationalize that by they were traveling independently in hyperspace for so long, or in I think they call it dark space or whatever, that maybe they just were incommunicado for a while, but still a bit. There's definitely a few times in the New Jedi Order where books kind of had to just deal with the fact that Vector Prime is a little bit different.
Yeah, I think it probably would have been better and no one really would have cared if they just said, oh yeah, that first wave we got our beachhead and then we stopped and they died. Good for them. They were sacrificed. They died with glory in battle, but instead it's no, they're fucking morons.
That's the weird part. Like it doesn't feel like they need to do that. Like it doesn't feel, it honestly just feels like the Praetorian Vong encountered a more determined force than they were expecting because the kind of the heroes were there. So yeah, I don't really need them to be kind of, you know, I guess part of the fact is too, there would be a certain amount of shame within the Yuuzhan Vong just being a part of a failed military expedition. So maybe it's just that. Like
they're okay enough with people like dying well, but
yeah, but maybe we're like the Praetorian Vong failed so poorly. Like, although I guess they did take down Cern Padal and a Star Destroyer and stuff.
They killed Chewbacca. No one else has killed Chewbacca before. They don't know that, but like there's an element of it that works with some of the political maneuvering where it's like, oh, we want to make Nominor look as shitty as possible, but it feels like that's almost secondary to the idea that no, they really believe the Praetorate Vong are just shit no matter how long the war goes on. Because if it was done as like an initial response to, oh, how could they lose to such a soft galaxy of gross beings? How did you fail on this? And there are elements of that where it does exist, but like even as they get into the war, they're just like, no, you're all trash.
Yeah. And I said that until this book because one of the interesting things is with Centerpoint Station fires and it eviscerates the Vong fleet, but even more is even more brutal towards the Hapen fleet, and the Vong are like, have we just like usually it's been the New Republic like unable to deal with the psychology of the Vong, and in this case the Vong are like, did we totally misunderstand these people? Did they do that on purpose? Did they just savage half of their forces to defend, like to take us out? They're kind of unable to rationalize it. And
nope, we just missed. Sorry, guys.
Well, yeah, that could have been an interesting plot line where like where the people like Thraken end up being effective in some way, and then but obviously if it's a Star Wars book with, you know, good morality, you got to kind of explore why in the end it doesn't work. But I guess we get a bit of something like that in with the Lusankia in when Wedge is kind of bombing the shit out of his own positions and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot more of the uh mind games going on with the Edge of Victory duology.
Yeah.
Where they have like all the fake weapons. Wedge does a bunch of creative fake out tactics. Because there's like the fake super laser they sort of shoot Coruscant with. There's the bombarding his own positions. But yeah, here it's just that they fucked up that badly.
Yeah, it's just funny to watch them like, oh shit, like they literally like call them savages, and it's interesting. It's like, yeah, we didn't understand what the limits of their actions were,
And neither did they.
Yeah, it's kind of
we never stopped thinking of ways to hurt them, and neither did they.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. One thing that I want to talk about is the Rin are obviously like very clearly meant to be tie-ins or meant to be kind of allegorical representations of like Romani people.
Yeah.
Where especially like how we see them stereotypically. What did you think of that? Because that's like, I'm trying to think of the best way to word this. It's definitely like a group of people that, especially it feels like when that book was coming out, it would have like when I was a kid, you know, people would openly be racist towards groups like that. And still today, like you can get away saying a lot more, you know, and I was kind of glad that that book addressed that in its own way about how I don't know. It was an interesting kind of more, it was in a way a very, very blunt take on something. Like it's very, very obvious what the comparison's meant to be. Like you read one chapter of it and it's clear, but it's also a bit more kind of a commentary than we usually get, I think.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah,
there's a lot of the issues like that, both on the refugees, the Rin specifically, and a bunch of other like political dimensions in this book that James Luceno is a lot more forward on than any other books in the or any of the other authors in the NJO, I think, and a lot of other authors more generally in Star Wars, especially for like this period of Legends. So I'm kind of curious to. It wasn't something that I paid as much attention to between the different like I wasn't thinking of the different authors and how they approached it in my last read through of NJO. So that's something I want to see how much that continues after this, because I know there's another book that is very focused on the refugees on Duro and whether it takes any of that on as bluntly or uses any of the characters the same way. Because I feel like that one ends up being a lot more. I forget which book it is, but it's where the whole Solo family is finally back together on Duro, and they end up having to shave their heads.
Oh yeah, and then there's a fight scene that I'm pretty sure was like in maybe the reader's guide where
there's a picture of bald Jason fighting Sabo.
Yeah.
But hilarious. Yeah, like it seems like James Luceno was a lot more forward with the commentary on that. And I don't love having the whole species as stand-in for specific ethnic groups situation. That's something that a lot of science fiction is kind of, and fiction more generally, has started moving away from for pretty good reasons. But I think ultimately it was attempted to be used for a good purpose here. And
yeah, it's blunt, but it's like at least saying something, because like part of the problem is with Star Wars books is like the morality or the message can sometimes be a little basic, where it's like, don't kill people. Don't be angry.
Don't kill people unless it's fun.
Racism, it's not great. And in this, it's like, it's a little bit more than that, where like people think that we're like, people think we're shitty because they're like people just put us in this box. It's kind of, and then you see how people treat the Rin, and then you see what the Rin are actually like, and it's, yeah, especially at the end where they're in the Fondor space station. That was interesting.
Yeah, and even when they're on Ruan, where uh like I think Dromo, all the agricultural workers were like working in manure, and then people were still saying like, "Oh, get away from the Rin. We can't have them working here because they're dirty." Like we're all literally working in shit right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Anything else you want to say about the book? Want to talk about overall thoughts or anything, impressions, level of enjoyment, and then maybe go to some questions? Or is there any other discussion topics you want to cover?
Yeah, I think we can go to our ratings now.
Just checking my notes. I think we covered everything I wanted.
Yeah, I think we hit all of mine. Like it's definitely a book that has less focus than a lot of other books, just because there's so much it has to set up for. But I think what it does cover, it covers pretty decently.
One thing I wanted to note is we get some good hut action. We do have that one hut just like destroying a bunch of Yuuzhan Vong warriors, which is cool.
Yeah.
But I was also left thinking, on some level, of all the species in the galaxy, I bet you the Vong kind of like the Hutts. Obviously, they don't like Nal Hutton. They don't like how they've savaged their home world. Or sorry, they don't like the Nar Shaddaa because it's complete city. It's covered by a city. It's a moon covered by a city, and Nal Hut is an industrial shithole. But they must like the fact that they've got people carrying them around, right? Like that's organic technology. They got slaves carrying them around everywhere.
But usually they're like hover cars carrying them around. Like maybe they're okay with the with if they had just a litter, but even then they're like it's all made out of metal. I was feeling like the Hutts are one of the species that the Vong would hate the most. Like maybe the Yun Harla people would be okay with them, but they're pretty much all political maneuvering, never want to fight anyone. If they do fight, they get like their lackeys to do it for them. And just the absolute disgust that the Vong were looking at Nal Hutta with.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I do like how one of the ways they try to like get the Hutt's favors through like bioengineered food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it? Yeah, it was when they were talking about Nar Shaddaa, it's like, or Nal Hutta, like, oh, this used to be fucking jungles, and look how great we made it. The Vong would have loved the jungles.
Like this is shit.
Yeah.
Well, because they basically are using a bunch of the other Hutt planets at this point as shipbuilding worlds or buyout worlds. So
yeah,
like that's how like shitty the Hutts are. Like they're giving up their own worlds freely, for the Vong to use as ship wombs or whatever else, instead of coordinating with the New Republic and fighting back.
Yeah, like it's not like Nal Hutta is nice natural Dagobah swamp. It's more like shit sewer industrial swamp. So it's not
in Nova Scotia there's a place called the Sydney Tar Ponds. And that's exactly what I imagine. I imagine Nal Hutta like that, just on a wide scale.
That's where they're going to do the live action filming for it.
Yeah, on Star Wars episode, we'd be on like 55 or something.
You think it'll take that long to get to Nal Hutta in live action?
Oh, I thought you meant when they're recreating this book.
Oh, no.
I thought there was a chance we'd see Nal Hutta in the Book of Boba Fett. But we gotta get. You're right. We gotta get there eventually, right?
Yeah, there's no way.
Clone Wars. Yeah,
there's no way.
No, yeah, we definitely will. We see it in the Clone Wars, and it was pretty much the same from what I remember. Maybe a little less. No, it's still pretty industrialized. Yeah.
Yeah, like we did set it up. We didn't go there in Boba Fett, but we did get the setup of like, oh yeah, we're fucking off back to Tatooine or back to Hutt space because Tatooine kind of sucks now. So
yeah, and that's why I thought we might see it. Like I thought we'd get more, and I think we still possibly could. Like I think that was probably Well, yeah, and I do think that was why the Hutts were introduced, because like the Hutts are still a threat at the end of season 1. Like they've only really, the Book of Boba Fett only kind of deals with a pretty small threat, which I kind of like. Yeah.
But at least we got to see Ossus.
Mm-hmm.
Was that a thing we talked about?
We did,
last...
yeah. I think we actually covered it the episode beforehand.
Okay.
One thing that Dave Filoni, I think it was Dave Filoni or maybe Jon Favreau stated, or it might have even been the author, was that Ossus actually came from the Book of Boba Fett script, not from the book.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was actually the show which made that distinction. And I'm kind of wondering, I kind of want to go back now and listen to the what's it called? The descriptive audio, because sometimes they'll straight up say, they'll be like, Boba Fett's starship flies in front of a verdant, hilly planet, Ossus.
I feel like if they'd have done that, then we would have been hearing about it much earlier.
You'd be surprised because, and I can't take full credit for this, but when the Dark Trooper episode,
but that was like week of that people started talking about it.
But the only reason people started talking about it was because, I don't want to take full credit, but one of my blind viewers messaged me and said, listen to the end of this.
Yeah, but I that's why I'm saying, like, I'm not saying they wouldn't hide the details in there. I'm just saying if they had, we would have, we probably would have heard about that before, like 8 months later.
It's fair.
But so I think I would give it a B. I think this is going to be on the B tier for me, just like the last book.
This will get a B. If the beginning and the end weren't so good, it would have been down to a C, but I'll give it a B.
Yeah, it's got a lot of like the parts of a book I really like in it, but just as a whole, it doesn't quite come together as well as some other ones do. Especially for James Luceno, like I may be underselling it a bit or rating it a bit lower just because I have much higher expectations for him as like the overall #1 rated author on the podcast, I think, other than maybe Timothy Zahn.
Yeah, I mean, I think Timothy Zahn may be lower just because of the some of his newer Thrawn stuff.
Yeah,
the ascendancy for me. But I agree. He did a lot of the good James Luceno things. Like he connects the characters, like the New Republic intelligence officer, in a realistic, like in a way that makes sense and isn't forced. And he does a really good job of making it feel like it's in the same universe as the Corellian trilogy and the Black Fleet Crisis and all these things.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the other part's not great.
Yeah, I think that was something that we had a problem with in the first book, where I do actually much prefer this to Hero's Trial, where I think what I said at that point was that a lot of the cameos in that did kind of feel forced, where it was like, oh, this person's here to be this person. Whereas in this situation, like the Corellian trilogy characters being on Corellia, being on Centerpoint, makes sense. Like they show up in a way that makes sense. The Bollocks cameo is a bit less, like probably the most out there thing, but it's also possibly not Bollocks. Like it's just a labor droid who Han asked probably too many times if he's Bollocks, but still.
And he does have a hollow bit in his chest, like Bollocks did.
But yeah, so B. All right, that's 2 B's in a row.
B.
Right. We do have a few questions. They were actually some lengthy questions as well.
Oh, you didn't prepare a thing, did you?
No, I didn't do a Glup Shido for this week.
Next week.
Well, that's something we should say is what are we doing next week?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Because I think we agreed to keep the Glup Shidos off of the book episodes and do them on the intermediate episodes.
Oh, did we? Okay. Well,
I think so.
No, that sounds right. I don't know. I don't know what I want to do. Something short. I need to take a week off from reading.
I don't know if we want to go straight back to.
Yeah, I don't think I want to go straight back to Tales of the Jedi. We'll figure it out. By the time you're listening to this, I'll include something at the very beginning. If you're watching this live, maybe check out the audio podcast, and we'll probably tweet it as well.
Unless I edit this one. That would be a huge twist.
That would be a twist, yeah.
Could happen.
Yeah, good. Definitely.
Yeah, so we'll figure that out. We do have some questions, though. And I will do a Glup shit out for next week. Spoiler alert, it will be someone from a musical character from Return of the Jedi, probably.
Oh yeah, you told me. It's gonna be a good one.
But our first question is from Jacob, who asked, do you think that Outbound Flight could fit into the new canon? Would love to see an episode covering this book. It's one of my favorite reads, Star Wars or otherwise.
I think we talked about that kind of during the Thrawn. It not only could it fit, you caught this more than I did. It's almost implied to have happened.
Yeah, like most of the big plot details, you can basically take for granted from Outbound Flight. So functionally, if you want to read Outbound Flight before the other Ascendancy books, if Timothy Zahn does anything else in the Chiss area there, he basically wrote that, assuming he was building on what he did with Outbound Flight. Yeah. So unless someone else supersedes it, then just take it as presented there, I think.
Yep. So the next one is from Jordan, who says, "Up yours, cultural Marxists. We'll see who crucifies who." All right, next one. Do you want to read the next one, Corey?
Yeah, this comes from Jaden, from Jordan to Jaden, who says, I just finished my first listen to the Thrawn Trilogy 20th Anniversary Edition and the re-release.
Nice.
And wonder how y'all both felt about the Azalmari. While I both like and dislike the idea of them, I wondered how you both felt about them. I like how they're one of the few ways to counter Jedi and Sith, but I also don't like how Vader, Bane, Palpatine, etc. could simply be blasted if someone were near. I much prefer HK-47's solution. What do you think?
I don't remember what HK-47 solution is. Is it just the type of weapons he uses? I remember that tree, that discussion tree in KOTOR, how he's got like a Jedi killing plan, but I don't remember what it is specifically.
Yeah, I like having it. Like, I like having some tool that characters can plan carefully to take the power away from Jedi. I think usually the way it's done, it's not just like, Warsha, Yzalmari. They have to do some sort of planning to take advantage of it. Because you still have to lock down the Jedi.
I like that there's a Jedi weakening tool. I don't know if I like the idea of these force bubbles and stuff. Yeah. I don't like it necessarily for the Vong either. And I feel like this book kind of ignored that a couple of times, where in the final battle, Ganner force pushes a Vong.
It was, I don't know, it's kind of weird where some of the books make it so that they can't use force powers on them. Some of them just make it where they can't sense them.
So it's like you could push. Yeah, because it's weird because this book almost does it both ways, where when Worth Skitter, who rest in peace, he does die in this one.
Thank fucking God.
Yeah, he force chokes a Vong, sort of, but not by constricting his throat like Vader would do, but by he makes a bubble of no air around his head, basically. Yeah. So that's like how you could force choke something without touching them.
That's my favorite Avatar power, though, too.
Do they do that in Avatar?
Yeah, fucking.
I'm trying to remember.
I think that's in Legend of Korra. It gets pretty fucking dark.
I haven't seen that one yet. But like, so it's like, is a force push grabbing somebody and throwing them back, or is it, pushing a bunch of air or pressure or force at them? Because if it's the latter, then there's no reason why you couldn't do that to a Yuuzhan Vong. Just like there's no reason why you couldn't do it to any kind of inanimate object.
Yeah, like you can throw a desk. Is it that you can't? Like, are they removed from the force?
Well, I remember this comes up later with Force Lightning specifically, where I think Jaina, for some reason, I believe, maybe I'm wrong, but I think Jaina shoots a Force Lightning. Maybe I'm misremembering. And she's like, I'm not hitting the Vong, I'm hitting, his clothes, or like whatever, but
I'm hitting between the Vong.
Yeah, it'll come up again, is my point. But just generally, I don't like the anti-force stuff too much. Yeah. I'm not talking about Waru's anti-force either, because that is sick.
Yeah, I don't think it takes too much away from like the Jedi powers that there can be a situation in which they're able to be shot. Like, they're still pretty physically skilled as well. And like, sure, it means you could shoot Vader, but he's probably getting out of this Almari somehow. So like there are plenty of stories that don't have force related stuff, and those characters still end up doing badass stuff. So it's fine with me.
I think that was the best. The Jedi trap that I remember the most is the one from the first book of the Thrawn duology, where Luke's like in that cage, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
That was
Like
probably the best it's been done.
Hard does it a few good places or a few good ways.
The
Then
first
there's
time, yeah.
then there's the whole Empire of the Hand thing where they have the entire fortress or the main command room pretty much covered by Zelmari, which is a little bit weirder. Like I guess they were breeding them that they covered, but oh well.
And I don't like the idea, but I kind of like the rationale where it's like the Asalamiri were hunted by force sensitive creatures, so they developed whatever. It makes sense, I guess.
All right, so our next question comes from John. We've really been covering the Jays this week.
Hold on, my son just woke up. Just
okay,
keep at it. I'll be right back.
I'll read the question out for everyone, and then I'll repeat it for him. But John says, love the show. I have a question about something you mentioned in last week's episode. Inspector of the Past, Luke thinks he's been using the Force too much, so instead of crushing the cannons of the pirate ship he's fighting, he lets Han and Chewie blow them up. Even though that will kill all the pirates, well, he could just disable the ship they'd live. I feel like this is often the same problem with when they try to address how to use the Force in Star Wars books. They talk about not using it as much or as overtly or whatever, even though doing that would be the quickest way to save one or multiple lives. There's definitely something to characters using the Force in a stupid way, like Luke rebuilding Vader's castle. My problem is that the characters consider how they're using the Force when they're trying to save lives, or they don't want to do some Force thing and so kill the people with the lightsaber who they wouldn't have had to otherwise. I might be totally wrong about this, but I have noticed it a lot, especially in Zahn's books. Thanks, and hope you have a good day. So yeah, like largely it comes down there to the idea that like frivolous use of the Force is what's bad, and like overly relying on it is part of what can lead you to the dark side. So it's usually that line that they're trying to figure out where am I using the Force correctly in this situation if I can save someone's life with it, or was there another solution that doesn't rely on the Force too much? And Zahn is usually the one who goes down that rabbit hole the most. A lot of the other authors kind of abandoned that view of the Force, but it was kind of building on what Yoda was saying in the original trilogy, where like it's the same way as how the dark side is easier. If you end up using the Force way too much, then you rely on it, then you just use it for stuff like directly killing people. Like there's not a fundamentally huge difference between killing someone with the Force versus killing someone with the lightsaber, but when it gets presented that way, that's the direction they're coming from. Use the Force too much and you go dark. Good point, Justin.
You're welcome. Carried it.
I tried to say the parts of the answer for when you were here so that you might have an idea what the question is and weigh in it, but I take it.
I got the question, but I just don't really have anything else to add.
Just don't care about the podcast.
It's just honestly a shit question. No, I'm joking. No, you used a good answer.
Sweet. Next question comes from Joel, because I want to stick with the J questions. And Joel asks, in your opinion, do you think the new canon authors tend to be a lot more friendly and cooperative with each other than, say, the Bantam era? There doesn't seem to be a lot of factionalism like there was in the early days when it seemed like it was Zan, Stackpole, and Alston against Kevin J. Anderson and Veitch.
I don't really know. I think it's hard to say because the stories have been a little less consequential so far. But it definitely does feel like certain shit's been ignored. Like a lot of what happened in Aftermath, it feels like the authors are sometimes trying to deal with it, not outright ignore it, but like it doesn't seem like a lot of the plot threads that book set up have been fully embraced. And I'm sure we'll do those books maybe after NJO. But like the idea of Palpatine's observatories was set up in that book to be this big thing. So that's for Battlefront 2 never really touched on. And same with with other Like, there's this massive character introduced in that book, Gallius Rax, who's the fact that like he is a character who should have been in many other Star Wars books. Same with Ray Sloan, arguably, and they've kind of just been ignored. Other than again, Battlefront 2. So maybe, but I don't know. I really don't know.
I think part of that with the new canon stuff is just that there haven't been as many books going over the same thing. I think at a baseline, there's more of an idea that when you agree to do a Star Wars book now, you're buying into the idea that what you want to do is going to have to be part of this bigger whole, which was less established in the early 90s. So there was less of a feeling by Zan in particular that like, oh, if I'm writing my book, why do I have to care what Dark Horse was doing with Dark Empire? And they got around that by just putting his stuff before it. So I do think some of this stuff with like between that trio and Kevin J. Anderson gets a little bit exaggerated. Like clearly they had some different ideas, but I don't think there was quite as much like open hostility as some people treat it as. I think the biggest thing was the shipping wars with Mara versus Callista, which we get a little hint at here in this book, where
a little joke at it.
Was it Worth Skitter who says that, like, responds to a question of where Callista is by saying that Mara had her disappeared, basically.
yeah.
So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. Where that was like a really big fan thing as well, but Callista lost, she got shipped off, and there you go. That's it.
Yeah, we also just don't know. Oh, August is up again. I'll answer this and then go up. We also just don't know what it's like behind the scenes, too.
Yeah.
And they've also clearly made a space for comics and books, and they're not really intersecting that much. But...
Yeah. And some of the people that are involved in one aren't really involved in the other, where like Kevin Scott and Charles Soule do a lot of books and a lot of comics. So yeah. I think the main thing there though is just that when they started doing the new canon stuff, there was a bit more of an idea that everything ties in together just because of how media has evolved. But I will open the next one. So I think we will go to Michael's question, who says, "Well, I very much enjoy the NJO era and consider the Vong very interesting. The movies were always supposed to be the main piece of Star Wars, both in and out of universe. They occupied the highest level of canon and were the central plot point on the timeline." I'm not sure if Justin is going to be back. We'll see. But I think rather than answering the questions now, maybe we'll hold it for next time. And then I'll make sure that he's able to actually be here for the next one. Because whatever we end up doing, we'll probably have more time for questions. So it makes more sense to do it that way. So with Justin gone, I think that's going to do it for the episode for now. Thank you for listening, everyone. And we'll be back next Thursday with whatever Justin announced or whatever I announced at the start of the edited in intro. Otherwise, we'll let you know on Twitter for those of you watching live here. I will try to tweet it as soon as we know what's going on with that. But thanks again. Have a good night, everyone.